Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Blockcast with Will and Simon. Hey Will, how are you today, mate?
Good, Simon. What's today's topic?
We are talking about Railgun, another privacy application, but I guess significantly different to some of the privacy applications we've got before, in that this one is not a separate layer. It is all built on the existing Ethereum layer, or it's built on Arbitrum and Binance Smart Chain at the moment. What do you want to tell us about it, Will?
Well, I think it's super important, and something that users don't really realize when they're on Ethereum or any other blockchain is that most blockchains, most tokens out of Monero are 100% tagged, in that you can easily trace back any transaction, any token to a user. And it's almost the same as using a marked dollar. So dollars are fungible and they're indistinguishable from each other, the paper kind I mean. And so if I've got one and you've got one in your pocket, they're completely distinguishable. But then if you're to take mine and mark it with radioactive ink or UV ink or something like that, and I go and I spend it at a store, well, anybody who sees that dollar at that store will know that there is a path between the dollar in that store and myself, and that we're somehow connected. And that could create all sorts of problems. And so, what Railgun is doing is it's introducing that kind of privacy on layer one. That is something that we haven't seen before.
Yeah, absolutely. It's quite unique and different. And I'd point out it's not just building it on layer one; it is building it on layer two. So this is a project, I guess, or an application on the layer one or on the layer two. So that's quite a unique difference, I think, in that we don't have to do bridging to utilize this project and utilize the privacy that it entails. So, what kind of privacy does it do, and how does it do it, Will?
Well, it's different from the other projects because one way you can get privacy is you can use a mixer. That's a little bit difficult to do because you have to take your tokens and very specific tokens, not any tokens. You have to throw them in the mixer, then you wait, and then you withdraw them at some point after they've attained enough anonymity. Another thing you can do is you can also go to a layer two like ZK Money and bridge your tokens there. But then the problem that you face when you're up there is that, well, there's not so many projects up there, so you don't get enough liquidity. You can't trade. You can't have fun with your money, essentially. And at some point, you'll have to come back down to Ethereum to do anything really interesting, like trade or participate in Aave. Now, what Railgun does, like you mentioned, is it works on different EVM blockchains, and it also works on layer twos as well. It lets you essentially shield your tokens within the same layer that you are. So if you're on layer two and you want to shield your tokens from there, bam, just put them into Railgun and they're shielded. If you're on Ethereum and you want to shield your tokens from Ethereum, just put any token, any NFT you want in there, and it's completely shielded and impossible to track.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the big thing to gauge from this is that, as you said, if you have a privacy layer two, then everything needs to be rebuilt on there. It needs to build dexes on there. It needs to be lending platforms. So any application that you want to use that's existing on layer one needs to be rebuilt on that private layer two. Whereas Railgun, it doesn't need to do that. It doesn't need to rebuild all these applications. It does, however, need those applications to, I'm not sure exactly how, but they need to tweak their code to allow these Railgun wallets to interact with their applications. Is that how it works?
Yeah, that's the thing. Once you put your tokens on Railgun, how it creates your privacy is that, let's just pretend it's myself and yourself using Railgun and no one else on it. And you deposit a piece of ETH, and I deposit a token of ETH. Now, somebody withdraws that token. It's really hard to tell whether it's me or you. Multiply that by thousands of users, it becomes near impossible to understand who's putting money and who's withdrawing money. Now, where it gets crazy is that you can put in any tokens in there, and you can also trade well inside that wallet, and that is completely shielded with ZK proof. So nobody really knows exactly what's going on. That means I can go inside with my Ethereum, trade you for maybe an NFT. An NFT comes out, no one knows who has it. Now, the other thing Railgun can do is that once our tokens are inside, yeah, we can play around with them and trade them on the inside. You can also it can also trade on your behalf on the outside. That means if I put in Ethereum and I want to deposit it to Aave, let's say, Railgun can actually deposit that Ethereum on Aave and manage the interest levels and everything, and withdraw the interest that I wanted to really securely. The only catch is that Aave would need to do a really slight change, not to their smart contracts, but just to the sort of like their front end interface that communicates with the smart contract. That is one disadvantage of Railgun in that if you really want to interact with these other protocols, they have to make some small changes for it to work with the protocol.
Yeah, and I like that from the perspective of the user, in that the user doesn't have to do anything. I mean, we said it before. If you're going to a private layer two, the user has to go and move their funds across from there. But with Railgun, it means the developers can do something so the users don't really need to experience much friction at all. Really, they can just use the protocols, as they normally would. Now, as my understanding of it works, is that Railgun also has two elements of how it works. If the developers, as we're using an example on Aave, allow Railgun addresses to be utilized, and you can directly interact with them like that. However, just a simple swap function that currently exists and currently is in use on the Railgun network, when you are, say, swapping your wrapped ETH to DAI through on the Railgun network, it changes it back to a normal Ethereum public address through a smart contract, goes through a DEX and swaps it for you, and then brings it back onto the privacy side. So, is that an easier way of how people could apply Railgun, by having this jumping out of privacy onto I guess, a public address, but not attached to you anyway, and then jumping back in through smart contracts? Is that an easier way for developers, or is going down the path of actually changing the code to allow the ZK addresses easier for them to integrate?
Well, there's two ways Railgun can allow you to trade tokens. One of them, like you mentioned, is it actually goes outside and it trades them on your behalf, and that is for anywhere that the developers have actually integrated it. And just to say that it's actually a fairly simple change. Really, it's not a difficult thing. It's just the developers that need to decide, well, let's make this change. Railgun also has a cool feature where trades can actually happen from inside Railgun itself. It has a sort of database that is managed by Merkle trees of who has how many tokens. That's kind of how it knows exactly the balances for everybody. Really, it's actually a really simple structure. It's actually a shared wallet, and once everybody's tokens are in the wallet, it keeps track of the tokens in there, and that means it can also let you trade any tokens internally. So if I want to trade my ETH for DAI and there's somebody inside the wallet itself that has DAI and wants to trade with me, then Railgun can do that for me. However, if it needs to go outside, uh, then I guess the protocol can choose to do that and trade. Um, just to mention that trading isn't the only thing it can do. Like it can essentially interact with all of these other DeFi protocols. The caveat being that the protocol developers need to make that small change to their interfaces to allow Railgun to communicate
Yeah.
with
So
them.
let's talk about that then, because obviously, from what I've played around with it, the only thing that you can currently do is swap. So, what's needed? What's going to be the incentive to make these developers want to integrate Railgun?
I think that's a really difficult question because if you're in Aave, you already have a lot of tokens deposited in there. I think what needs to happen is users need to really desire this privacy. There's a time back in the day when privacy was not the standard in the internet we have, and then I guess slowly SSL became introduced, and now it's really impossible to even run a site without SSL. The browser will tell the user, "Hey, this is completely unprivate. What are you even doing?" This hasn't reached the blockchain yet, and users seem to be a bit laissez-faire about it. And that's the thing with privacy, you don't really need it until you do. And so the problem is that users haven't felt the pinch. And every now and then something happens and a user gets caught in the dragnet. Let's say what happened when Tornado Cash was declared sort of a rogue organization by the US. Anybody who had interacted with Tornado Cash was in trouble. And so what happened was some hackers uh, who had used Tornado Cash, they withdrew from Tornado Cash and they sent some of those tokens to famous people like Vitalik. So they all received a bit of that. And, that is essentially just put them on the target. And at that point, if I received that ETH, let's say it's $1,000. At some point, I think I would need to answer to the law, or it would at least be weighing on my mind. And at that point, I would wish that I used or had privacy as a default. The problem is people don't realize this. And to answer your question, a long story short is that I feel like users need to demand this in order to make developers more proactive, so that they can implement it.
Yeah, so it's got to be a user-driven demand because developers obviously don't need to do it, and so they'll only do it if the users require it of them, kind of thing. Okay, that makes a lot of sense to me. Now, let's talk about the actual elements of privacy because similar to Tornado Cash, it makes you pseudo anonymous to a degree because once you came out of Tornado Cash, it was a public address. So similar with Railgun, you will go into it from a public address. So if someone's watching the blockchain, they'll know you've moved assets in. And at some point, that comes back out. And it can go to originally an anonymous public address on the Ethereum network. But at some point in time, that public address is going to make it to a fiat on and off ramp, and then you will be effectively doxing yourself. So how much is this needed if effectively the on and off of the privacy is still on chain, people can still see it? So do we still actually need it? Because at the end of the day, when you bring it back out, everyone knows about it.
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge problem, like you said. And there's actually people out there who are working on algorithms to actually find these people. And the thing is, they don't even need to go to an off ramp. One of the things they do is they use this kinds of heuristics to try and figure out who it is. Like Railgun might already have thousands of people, and then I might deposit my tokens and withdraw them tomorrow. The one thing that could dox me is maybe I'm really impatient with my gas, with my transfers. So when I deposited it, I might have used something like 300 gas. That's a really unusual number. And if they see a transaction coming out with 300 gas, already they can start to guess it's me. And then if it's like at a similar time, I might be a night owl and I might do all my transfers at night. Uh, that's another indication. So there's all of these things that can still dox you before you even get to the off ramp. And it's such a huge pain point. And the problem is that uh, until protocols like Ethereum really get serious about privacy, the same way they got serious about going to proof of stake and about sharding, until these things develop sort of bulletproof anonymity uh, that is default, I think we're always going to have this problem. And the only thing we can do is essentially just try to practice good OPSEC. That means you put your tokens into a mixer and you get them out and you remix them, or you put them on a layer two, or you put them on Railgun. But you've got to be pretty careful, you know. And the long story short is that it's really hard. We need privacy, and solutions right now are just trying their best, but they're not bulletproof. That's the truth
Yeah, and
about it.
I think there's a big difference
You
between
know,
the concept of
yeah.
privacy and secrecy. That was a good slogan that I got just the other day. Is that we should be allowed to have private transactions. It doesn't mean we're doing anything that's illegal, which is kind of what the word secrecy kind of more entails. So it's a tool that we should probably use and be more used to accepting as the minimum. We need privacy in our transactions. As simple as that. I mean, the other aspects where this gets used though is okay, the secrecy element. That's where the governments don't like it, and until we get, I think in my mind, more clarity around issues like taxes around crypto, wrapped tokens and all these kind of things causing capital gains events. This is where these privacy things will actually still, have traction, especially in the crypto space, where people are trying to find a way to avoid maybe unnecessary rules, but also, they don't necessarily want the government to know everything that's going on with their money.
A good practice, I think, is perhaps if we all have a certain amount of crypto stash, so it's really good practice to make sure that there's a disconnect between our working wallet, the one that interacts with exchanges and everything, and our cold wallet. Anybody who's listening should really be having a cold wallet. Now, the thing is, that wallet can generate as many addresses as you like. And what you really want to do is you want to create a disconnection between your cold wallet and the outside world. So that means that you connect your ledger, you create a new wallet or whatever, and before you pull anything from an exchange into your cold wallet, pass it through a mixer, pass it through Railgun, and then put it in your cold wallet. And anytime you want to take tokens out of your cold wallet, move them into a mixer or into a railgun and then withdraw them. Because you really just want to create a disconnection between your cold wallet and then the hot wallet. Well, if a hacker wants to mess around with that, it might be a few $100, maybe a few $1,000. Uh, that's, I guess we don't have to be as careful with a hot
Yeah,
wallet
for
as,
sure.
as with
So
a cold
let,
wallet.
us talk about the investment
Um,
in Railgun here. So they do have a token Rail. I'm just looking at it now. The market cap 33 million market cap, fully diluted 57 million. So it's still a relatively small project. And as far as the tokenomics are concerned, it is a DAO. You know how much I love DAO tokens, Will, but
mm.
it does also generate fees. So you can stake your Rail tokens in order to participate in the governance voting, and then you will receive fees from it as well. From I think when you move crypto into and out of Railgun, they clip a fee there, and so that goes to the rail holders, which is kind of cool. So it's a voting mechanism and also a fee generation mechanism. What are your thoughts on the token itself?
Well, I think it's a really cool product, and I believe that given enough time, because I want to be sure that the smart contract itself is safe, I would be definitely keen to use it, and I'd also be keen to use it when I'm disconnecting my cold wallet to my hot wallet. That means that the amount I'm transferring isn't that big, so it's not a big deal. If anything happens to smart contract. Now, they do charge, I think, as you mentioned, some fees, perhaps deposit, perhaps withdrawal fees, and those go to the stakers, to the protocol. The problem I see with it is that it's probably not as used yet. It's not yet a kind of de facto standards. When I'm interacting with Aave or anything like that, it's not de facto. So I don't really see a huge usage of it that would really create a big amount of fees. Now, if we start getting connected to
Yeah.
protocols, that would be really interesting because the amount of money that is sitting in Aave and all of these DeFi protocols is pretty huge. So for me, I give it the wait and see in terms of how it's progressing. And then if I see it's growing, I'd
Yeah,
probably
I tend to
consider picking
agree.
it
I
up.
mean, I'm looking at now; it's got about $9 million in total value locked inside the protocol, which it's not a small amount of money, but it's not a large amount of money by any stretch of the means in DeFi and crypto these days. So, with it only currently being used with a swap function, it doesn't do enough yet. But it's certainly something to watch because, as you say, it takes one
Mm.
largish DApp to want to integrate it to then see it really snowball. Because I definitely see this being of more value than a separate layer two privacy solution because the ability to just utilize what's already existing on the layer ones is far more of interest to me. Reuse what is already built rather than rebuilding everything again on a private network. Yeah, that's what Railgun I think gives the real opportunity.
Mm.
So yeah, if it takes off, it'll be very slow and then all at once kind of reaction. I think if somebody big takes it on.
Oh yeah, and like you mentioned, if protocols like ZK Money, let's say, are doing pretty good, it means that there is definitely some sort of need for privacy and people who want to go to those layer twos specifically for the privacy. And I guess that is another way of thinking about it. We could compare it and see what its market cap is compared to a protocol like ZK Money, in which case there might be room for growth if there's kind of like a decent difference between
Yeah,
Railgun and
exactly. And
say ZK Money.
at the end of the day, if you can make it
And
easy for the
yeah.
user, that's all the better. And the users, mind you, with ZK Money, we could get to a point where it's a very seamless interaction going between layer one, layer two kind of thing. It's not there yet. But I feel Railgun, if it's just a very seamless interaction with it, that's going to drive users. Ease of experience for the user will drive demand up. So we'll be interested to see where it goes.
Yeah,
Yes,
definitely.
awesome. Well,
Interesting
thanks for your time
project,
on this
though.
one.
Thanks, Simon. Until next time.